Hello and welcome to my commercial law update for the academic year 2024 to 2025. If you have followed me for a little while, you will know that I have a number of courses that are available for a small price on Gumroad, about the same that you would pay for a revision guide, but instead of being a rather long and boring book, they are instead split up into videos covering each of the different modules that you might expect to see on the various courses. And one of those courses covers the optional module of commercial law that a number of you might have chosen to do on the LL.B. My aim with these videos is to provide a little bit of a supplement each year, just to have a look at things that might come up throughout the course of the year, and you can use this information in any way that you see fit. It might be the sort of thing that fits well into an essay question, or it might be something to mention as part of a problem question. So with all that in mind, let's have a look at some of the commercial law updates from the past 12 months and looking ahead to the next 12 months. The first is the area of data protection, and obviously we came to the end of a parliament very recently in July of this year because of the general election that happened, and that switched from the Conservative government in the past to the new Labour government. In the past parliament we had the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, and this was dropped before Parliament was completed. In other words, it never had the chance to become an act. Now with the Labour government, there's actually questions about whether the new government will revive this bill. Personally, I think that this is relatively unlikely. The Labour Party didn't really oppose the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, but they weren't exactly enthusiastic about it either. One of the things that the Labour Party has talked about is a closer alignment with the EU. Obviously in the past Parliament a lot of the things were about Brexit, and the Conservatives were trying to sort of stake their own path for the UK. We're going to see a bit less of that under Labour, and if anything there's going to be a closer alignment with the EU rather than the UK rejoining. And the same is going to be true. So data protection is obviously one of those areas where there is a lot of control by the EU, and the UK previously followed the EU through the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. And whereas the Conservatives might have sought to try and establish their own path away from the GDPR, I think that what Labour are going to do is probably look to the GDPR for inspiration for their own legislation. It's kind of a similar story with artificial intelligence as well. One of those new things that since ChatGPT kind of took over the world about a year and a half ago, it's kind of become a very important issue, especially in the area of commercial law. Now, under the Labour Party, this was snubbed in the King's Speech, so there was no real indication that Labour were going to do a lot. And this kind of marries up with the Conservatives' approach, which was a light touch approach to regulation. We might see something similar from Labour. They might introduce specific regulations to try and regulate some of the key players within the industry. But also, as I spoke about in the past, we might look to the EU. The EU has passed its own version of the AI Act, and this is going to sort of try and establish a kind of benchmark for AI regulation, not only in the EU, but also across the world, because obviously a lot of businesses are dealing with the EU countries. So we might see a similar thing from the UK as with data protection, where the Labour Party and the Labour government looks towards the AI Act from the EU and tries to follow that sort of lead. Now, consumer protection is an area where the previous government was able to take action. The Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act 2024, that received royal assent in May and basically gives the Competition and Markets Authority greater power to regulate some of the big tech giant players. However, in the area of commercial law, it also allows the Competition and Markets Authority to take a lot more action against traders in general who are perhaps operating in a bit of a fishy way and not doing enough to protect consumers. We might see some expansion of this under Labour, although they are probably likely to sort of see where the Digital Markets Competition and Consumer Act leaves us. If there is expansion under Labour, it's probably going to be through the way of online safety. So this is going to be regulation of social media, rather than the commercial sector. Although if there is change in the commercial sector, it's probably going to be clamping down on some of the illicit ways that people can be operating online. And that might be through fraud or sales of illegal things like weapons. Finally, we have some case law. These are a few of the cases that have come up in the past 12 months. They're all shipping cases, all covered on the UK Law Weekly podcast that I also run, and hopefully you're subscribed to that. But if not, then I'd recommend that you do so just so that you can keep on top of the latest case law from the Supreme Court. Herculito, as I say, this is another shipping case, and this is all to do with piracy in the Gulf of Aden and who should be forced to pay ransom for goods. An interesting case there. Sharp Corporation and Viteri is a bit less interesting in the commercial context because it's a bit more about how the courts operate rather than shipping law or commercial law in general, but it is a fairly interesting case in its own right. And finally, RTI and MER shipping, that's all about how acts of God can be interpreted by the courts, and that case looks very closely at that. So, as I say, that's a general overview. If you want more information about those, you can go to uklawweekly.com and look those cases up to listen to the episodes. All the podcast is available on all of your podcast platforms, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I hope that you found this update for commercial law interesting and enlightening, and as I say, if you want to find out more information, I'll leave a link to the Gumroad course in the description to this video. Thanks very much for listening. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye!